Welcome to the Tank Museum and to Tankfest 2026. My name's Nick Winers and I'm marking my 18th Tankfest already.
And I'm Richard Cutler from World of Tanks and a former
World
tankie.
of Twanks.
What, like you said?
I did.
And former tankie with the Royal Tank Regiment.
And I'm David Bagley. I come from World of Tanks 2. I'm the head of community. So what's going on today?
So, Nick, what is Tankfest?
Tankfest is the world's finest display of historic moving armour. You can see a little bit behind us in the tank park there, but we've got living history reenactments as well, and that's before you go inside the museum and explore what is a fine collection of vehicles.
And what have we got coming up? We'll settle in for the next 3+ hours. We've got some amazing parts of the show to show you. Of course, it goes without saying, we've got the arena displays. We've also got the reenactments. We've also visiting lots and lots of other places. We've got interviews of behind the scenes. And we're also going to take a quick trip to Samir to see how they've been getting on with a rather special restoration. But, of course, the very special news for Tankfest 2026 was the first public viewing of Challenger 3, and we'll be talking much more about that and, of course, seeing the vehicle in action later on.
But, of course, the Tank Museum, don't forget, is a registered charity, and if you're appreciating the work we do in this fully live stream, we'd really appreciate your support. There are many different ways you can support us. You can go to our online shop, tankmuseumshop.org, and buy something you never knew you needed from us, but you can also join us on Patreon, YouTube memberships, become a friend of the Tank Museum, and that's something we'll also be telling you a little bit more about later on.
Yep, you should definitely become a friend with the Tank Museum like World of Tanks is with the Tank Museum. And so I'm here to share some of the news. Like for World of Tanks, we have some special in-game discounts going on right now. I know many of you want to know about the discount consumable and otherwise Tech 3 tanks and premium tank discounts. We also have a special prize giveaway going on right now with an RC TOG tank. I'm sure you've seen in Gleamlink. It'll be there every 2 minutes. And of course, for everybody on Twitch, you are here for the Twitch drops information, which requires me to flip the paper. And so after 60 minutes, you will have a chance of crew books or the Tier 10 Badger Tech 3 tank Mordred 3D style, or the Tier 8 Premium Tank ST66. After 120 minutes, you will have a chance, or you will receive 2 Tankfest Token Store tokens, which you can get some really cool tanks from there, as well as Richard's Commander, which is always good to get. And after 180 minutes, there's a chance of personal reserves, the Granite 3D style for the IS-4, or the Tier 9 French premium tank, the Char MLE. And I think that's everything that I've got to cover from
Well done, David.
Well, as you know, we always like to open Tankfest with a bang. And of course, Tankfest as an event is great fun, but we have to remember that there is, of course, a really serious side to this too, as we're going to see in our first video.
Iraq, June 2004. A rocket-propelled grenade slams into the front of a warrior infantry fighting vehicle. Suddenly, an entire troop is enveloped in the chaos of an enemy ambush. The RPG round strikes inches from the driver's head. He's stunned and bleeding. His commander is incapacitated. Many of the vehicle's occupants are wounded and choked by the rising smoke. Despite his own life-threatening injuries, and with no communication to the rest of the troop, he manages to gain control of the warrior. The blood pouring from his head obscures his vision, but he forces the warrior out of the ambush and into safety, before finally losing the battle to stay conscious. Just a few weeks before, that same driver was at the head of a column of warriors sent to rescue a foot patrol from another enemy ambush. Pounded by enemy fire and repeated RPG strikes, the warrior is hit again and again. Radio comms are down, and the vision blocks are smashed. The commander and the gunner are both wounded. Unable to see, unable to communicate, and unsure if the rest of his crew are even alive, he is forced to act alone. He flings open his hatch so he can see his way forward. Now, exposed to enemy fire, he drives his burning, smoke-filled vehicle through the ambush, leading 5 other warriors and their occupants to safety. But he does not stop there. Still under fire, he pulls his wounded crew to safety, returning again and again to the stricken vehicle as it begins to burn. These 2 individual acts of heroism, carried out under intense enemy fire and at extraordinary personal risk, saved the lives of his fellow soldiers and earned Private Johnson Bahari the Victoria Cross. The Victoria Cross is the United Kingdom's highest award for valour in the presence of the enemy. Since the end of World War II, just 15 have been presented. Today, the Victoria Cross remains a mark of rare and extraordinary courage, of selflessness and devotion to others. Saturday the 27th of June is Armed Forces Day, a national event that recognises the contribution of the serving and former Armed Forces community. We are therefore honoured to welcome Johnson Bahari, VC, to open Tankfest 2026, riding in one of the Warriors he drove in Iraq 22 years ago.
This weekend I'm going to get to drive this vehicle again for the Tankfest. I'm looking forward to it. Why? Because there's a part of me that's still on the battlefield. I'm hoping that starting up the engine, hearing it again, driving it, packing it up and switch it off would give me that closure I'm looking for. If I don't get anything out of it and I could get that closure and I manage to mentally leave the battlefield, achieve something.
How you doing? It's an emotional moment, first time this tank's been driven by Johnson, and he's come out to do this for us today for you. I've got one thing to ask you to do. I need you to officially open Tankfest 2026. Can you do that for us?
Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to declare Tankfest 2026 open.
What a way to start Tankfest 2026.
Now, wasn't that incredible, Nick? What a sight to see. Challenger
Absolutely.
1, 2, and 3.
I know, it's incredible. We're so fortunate and it's the first time that the Challenger 1, 2 and 3 have all been seen together, certainly in the world, let alone just here in our arena. And yeah, what do you think as an ex-tanky of the way the Challenger 3 looks? Can you see yourself driving one?
Yes, we're not going to go too much into detail because there's a lovely video coming up about all of that. But could I see myself? Of course, if I was a much younger man, because I feel I probably struggle to get in the driver's cab at the moment.
Well, I say Challenger 3, it's the next generation British Army main battle tank. And our next video has Chris Copson, who's going to tell us a little bit more about it.
On Friday, we were delighted to see something special. The first public appearance of Challenger 3, the British Army's new main battle tank. So new that it hasn't yet entered regimental service. Challenger 3 represents a huge step forward in tank technology. A new smoothbore main gun, compatible with NATO ammunition, and fully digital plug-and-play architecture. Challenger 3 embodies all the traditional qualities of the British main battle tank. Hard-hitting and heavily armoured, but is also capable of infinite development as the situation dictates. This is the face of the future, a modern main battle tank designed for NATO high-intensity combat. I'm delighted to introduce Nick Bircham from RBSL. Nick, you're going to fill us in on some of the detail about Challenger 3. Now, just to begin with, and certainly to the uninitiated, this will look remarkably similar to Challenger 1 and Challenger 2. In broad terms, what's different? What is improved?
Well, so much has changed. It's hard to know where to start. But in the interest of brevity, first thing is the armour. So this is the latest iteration of British modular armour, which has proved its success in Ukraine on Challenger 2. Secondly, it's the new gun. So the smoothbore 120mm L55 gun is a NATO standard weapon, and it can take any ammunition from an accredited NATO country, which will bring huge logistic improvements. And then finally, this is the first all-digital main battle tank turret in the world. It will massively simplify the commander's job. And for the first time, for example, we have 24-hour day and night hunter-killer capability so that the commander and gunner can hand off targets to one another seamlessly.
And there are some people who have queried the idea that the tank has a place on the future battlefield. How exactly would you say that Challenger 3 is adapted to cope with all that?
Well, as you said, the battlefield's changing. And the main thing is that the battlefield is now so heavily scanned and surveyed that we have to really expect to be picked up and therefore probably engaged. So we have to be able to survive a few hits. British modular armour fitted on this vehicle will enable us to do that. Secondly, we have AI in the vehicle, so that the commander's station is supported with automatic tracking and monitoring of targets. We have an active protection system, which is capable of defeating incoming missiles and automatically detecting them. We have a laser warning system, which will cue the commander to laser threats, and remains at the heart of the British Army's 20-40-40 battlefield design.
Now, we've dealt with lethality, we have dealt with protection. I suppose the final element, the last bit of the iron triangle, mobility. How is Challenger 3 improved?
Well, the power pack on the vehicle has had some adjustments so that at low revolutions you get much higher torque, and that means it'll be much more agile and manoeuvrable at low speeds.
Yeah, we're still using the Cummins diesel, aren't we?
Yeah. Secondly, we have the Generation 3 hydrogas, which effectively enables the tank to squash bumps more easily, which means that power from the engine can go into speed and manoeuvrability rather than overcoming bumps. And then the final thing is, and it seems a simple thing, but we have a driver's rear view camera. So that means that the driver now can reverse almost as easily as he can go forwards, which will take a huge weight off the commander and free up his time for commanding his tank.
That sounds extraordinary, but after decades of standing in front of a tank, pointing in one direction and another so the driver goes right, that's a huge improvement. And presumably the increased manoeuvrability, that is going to be extremely useful in complex environment, potentially urban warfare, things of that sort.
Yeah, it's exactly what's needed.
Excellent. Nick, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
And we're very pleased to now be joined by Mr. Chris Price, the director of the Tank Museum. First of all, Chris, how's your Tankfest going?
Oh, this Tankfest they're always great, but this one, the weather's been fantastic. We've had plenty of tanks for people to see. The punters are coming up to me and saying how wonderful it is. What's not to like from my point of view?
And may I just say that the bow tie is absolutely...
Well, I thought I'd represent your former regiment.
Thank you,
so
sir.
I thought look after the Royal Tank Regiment. So.
Thank you very much. Now, Challenger 3, of course, Chris, a surprise for everybody.
It was, yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. Why was there so much secrecy concerning the unveiling of it?
Well, I had seen on social media that somebody had commented, why is it being kept so secret? And my first reaction was, we'll take a wild stab. Yeah, the reason being, basically, is it is still at the moment, it's not been released to the army. It's still a secret weapon. They want to get it out there in the public, but what they didn't want was all the build-up and all the kind of secrecy around it to be broken down before the event. And I think that's quite, when you think it's a developmental weapon still, effectively, I think that's a fair comment. Plus, also, isn't it nice to give people a surprise, something they didn't expect? Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that great? Doesn't that make people want to come back in case there's something like it again in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, I mean, a lot of us were, of course, incredibly surprised to see it in the first place, considering it's not in service. And
there was quite a lot of last-minute wrangling, but we got.
I'm sure. Yeah. Now, other things, restoration projects we always like chatting about with
you.
We do indeed. King Tiger, obviously the biggie for the next few years, yep. I imagine. How's it going?
It's going very, very well. The fundraising efforts that come in have really enabled us to really put some momentum behind the effort. There's still bits missing that we've got to go out and find, obviously, but fundamentally what we've now got to a point very close to the end of the stripped down stage. So we're beginning to know exactly what we've got and exactly the size of the apple we've got to eat to build this back up to a working King Tiger. So I would say it's on track. In fact, let's be optimistic. I think we're slightly ahead of track, but my engineers will...
Brave
will be, if they're watching this now, will probably be kicking the TV or whatever, or the computer. But no, I think we're on track. We're doing what we said we were going to do. And just if the more that money can come in, the more confidence we'll get to keep pushing forward with it.
And we'll be having, obviously, later on in the show, we'll be having a much larger update about how they're getting on that restoration.
So as a charity, why is Friends of the Museum such an important thing for you?
Well, I think charities are there for public benefit. They're there because a lot of people believe we're just a collection of tanks and it's all about getting tanks going, but it's not. It's all about the educational side of what we do and giving something back to society as a charity. And for us, the Friends are key to that, having people engaged in what we're doing, the people we can talk to, the people we can take counsel from. But also the point is they're giving something back to that charitable function of this museum. And yes, some of that money does go towards restoration, but an awful lot of it goes towards making sure that the world of tanks that we now all live in and are sponsored by is able to be broadcast to the world.
Chris, thank you so much for taking time out to join us here. I mean, firstly, obviously for you and all your staff, amazing event as always. And we saw there from Chris talking about the Friends, and here's a video about how you can join the Friends.
The Friends of the Tank Museum, because this history doesn't look after itself. Your support ensures that the story of the tank and the people that served in them is safe forever. The Friends of the Tank Museum is a global body of supporters who share one passion: preserving the world's finest collection of tanks. Join today. Support our work. Shape our future. Get closer to the collection. tankmuseum.org/friends.
And now it's time for the giveaway, where you'll have a chance to earn something that looks a lot like this. So one and only TOG 2. All you have to do is make sure you enter into the Gleam link, provide your details. It will be going live on Friday and Saturday. You'll still have a chance through Sunday. We will announce the winners during the Sunday historical live stream for a chance to win this one-of-a-kind, unique prize created by the community, for the community. So make sure you don't miss out on Sunday's historical live stream from World of Tanks from the Tank Museum. and welcome back. Of course, it's really important to highlight a little bit more information about the TOG2 RC tank giveaway I was speaking about earlier. You may or may not see it driving around by my feet. We'll see how the signal's going on right now. It does even have a firing gun. Make some noise. All you have to do is make sure you keep an eye on Twitch chat, or you can find a Gleam link with this, enter into the details. As long as you're in a viable country that we can ship to, you will have a chance of winning it. It's free. It costs you nothing. You should be all good. And we may, if you're lucky, have another tank to give away, which would be the Tiger 2. So, Richard, what do you think of it?
David, I mean, my one question is, can I please enter, or am I not allowed to?
I will tell people to look out for a Richard Cutland to...
Isn't that absolutely fantastic?
I love it. I think it's absolutely fantastic. Now, next up is going to be an introduction to one of the morning recaps, which I need to make sure I get this right, which is from the World War I display. And while they may be replicas, they are as close as possible to the original thing. And in fact, you're going to see a Whippet driving around the arena shortly, and it's going to be the first time it's running at Tankfest.
This is a medium Mark A. This is a Whippet. A Whippet is a small, fast dog. This is, well, fast is probably a bit of a misnomer, but Mark IV, the standard British heavy tank, across country will do 2 miles an hour. This is a replica of Musical Box. Musical Box, one particular tank, in 1918, got behind the German lines, roamed about for about 9 hours, shooting the living daylights out of everything. And this is a replica of D-51, Deborah, the tank that wound up buried in a hole just outside Cambrai at Flequier. Lots of rifle fire. They are firing back. The Whippet and the 2 Mark IVs, one female, big 6-pounder guns, one male, 6-pounder guns, and one female, which is machine gun armed. The idea here is that the males go for the strong points, the females use machine gun fire to knock out the infantry in trenches, to cut them down. These German soldiers, they've seen tanks before, but they're also aware that they are going to be in for it here. No, I think they're thinking the better of it. They are aware that they can't stand up against this combination of infantry and armour. They are retreating. I think they're very wise to do that. They're retreating, they're pushing off, and they will live to fight another day.
The Mark IV is one of the most important tanks during the First World War, and one of the slowest.
It was designed to break through the barbed wire and mud of no man's land, and to provide support for surrounding infantry, which it did at a whopping 2.5 miles per hour. These early British tanks were far from perfect, and the Mark IV was an improved version over previous models, but despite this, it's still probably one of the last tanks you'd ever want to be in. The entire crew is positioned around a 105 horsepower engine, which was not only loud, but was incredibly hot, bringing the internal temperature of the tank up to 50 degrees Celsius. Due to the exhaust design, carbon monoxide leaked into the cab, which meant crews operated whilst suffering from carbon monoxide poisoning. As if that wasn't enough, they'd also be breathing in fumes from the petrol, cordite and smoke building up on the inside, which made it a lot harder to see and think. And speaking of the crew, the tank would be operated by 8 men. Sometimes when tanks were crossing muddy ground, tank commanders even walked ahead of their tanks, testing the thickness of the mud with a cane to see whether or not it was suitable for the tank to cross. The driver, funnily enough, drives, but they aren't able to steer the tank. They can only select whether or not the tank drives forward or in reverse. The steering was left to 2 other members of the crew, the gearsmen. These 2 men changed the gears of the individual tracks, allowing the tank to turn. Because of the required communication between the commander and the gearsman and how loud the tank was, it was common to use hand signals. The final 4 crew members are 2 gunners and 2 loaders, who loaded and fired the 6-pounder guns.
There are also two types of these infantry tanks. This particular one is a mail tank, which means it has machine guns in the sponson as well as a 6-pounder gun. And these tanks were primarily used against defensive positions.
This is a female tank, which is armed with machine guns only. These focused on infantry and often drove alongside trenches, allowing the crews to fire down into them. In this case, the final 4 crew members were all machine gunners.
Suffice to say, tank warfare has come a long way over the past century.
You're watching Tankfest 2026 online. Welcome back, and thank you so much to FAM, talking all about, of course, the most prolific tank of World War I. And we'll have numerous other videos from FAM later on in the show.
And next up is one of my favourites, and I'm sure the favourite of many of the community. It's about from Dunkirk to Normandy, the evolution and transformation of British armoured vehicles going through the World War II period.
Those of you, if you know your wartime history, 1940, the British Expeditionary Force has a pretty torrid time out in France. We leave much of our equipment at Dunkirk. So the British Army are looking, and the British government are looking for other places to get tanks from, especially as our own manufacture tends to go towards aeroplanes to defend Britain and bombers to get back at Germany. So we go to America and order tanks from the Americans. And this is a Grant tank that was used by the British Army. Now, we wanted the Americans to actually make tanks for us, like the Valentine, the yellowy tank in the middle there. But quite rightly, the Americans said, hang on a second, the French are asking us to make tanks too. We're making our own tank. Why don't you buy that? So we very quickly buy into the M3 Grant. We're going to see that later on. We can talk about it more, and the famous M4 Sherman. Meanwhile, back in Britain, Vickers comes along. We're now gearing up, and it says to the War Office in 1938, we can also make you an infantry tank. Now that dinosaur that looked like it's going around in the background, that's actually the 4th type of infantry tank Britain ordered. 1940, we changed the order. You've got to get it right in a year, they said to the company, Vauxhall, who was the parent body. They working with the tank designers at Woolwich. This particular one is the Mark III Churchill that sees action at Dieppe, and it sees action in North Africa at the Battle of Alamein. And it's got that thick armour an infantry tank needs. The Mark VII Churchill has got thicker armour on the front than the famous German Tiger tank. And the very first manuals that went out with these tanks to the troops, if you look at the first page of the manual and it says, sorry lads, we know this has got problems, but we think we better give it to you now than later. It's got a lovely big roomy interior. It's got doors on the side. We can do other things with this vehicle. So we're starting to find the Churchill being used for, you've seen all your D-Day programs, things it can carry a mortar, a petard mortar. It can carry a bridge. Late 30s, as part of this rearmament program, they get 3 companies to come up with a new specification for a scouting vehicle, a scout car, not an armoured car, it's for scouting. The Dingo, it can go 55 miles an hour on the open road. It's got 5 reverse gears. You've got an inch of armour plate on the front to protect you. Carries a 19 radio set. You carry a Bren gun, but really your role is not to fight the enemy. Your role is to find out where they are, back off quick, get that message back to the main force formation. Now that Valentine there, as it moves around, that's a Mark IX model. It's got the larger gun on it, the British 6-pounder. They got rid of one of the crew. We had a 3-man, very small turret. They got rid of one of the crew members in the turret to squeeze the bigger gun in, because as the war progresses, and we'll see this again later on, it becomes a guns versus armour race in some of the areas of tank design. But there goes our Valentine, as I mentioned. 25% of British tank production in the Second World War, and sees service all over the place. Just like the Matilda that's leading it off there. The Matilda sees action in France in 1940, 4th and 7th Royal Tank Regiment with Matilda 1s and Matilda 2s. 16 Matilda 2s caused mayhem.
A show featuring my favourite, the Matilda 2, another incredible restoration by the Tank Museum. And of course, Queen of the Desert, what's not to love about the Matilda 2?
Quite right. Controversial opinion. I think the World War II, best tank of World War II might well have been the Matilda 2. It's one of the few vehicles in service at the beginning and still in service at the end. Anyway, moving on. Our next display celebrates two of the vital vehicles of World War IIs that for some reason the British decided to name after American Civil War generals. It features one of our guest vehicles from the Heritage War Institute in Belgium, who have very kindly brought over the Sherman Jumbo for us this year. We'll catch up with the team at the Heritage War Institute later on, but now let's go over to the arena.
Now the medium tank, for Americans, they give an M number. It's E when it's experimental. As soon as they approve it, it's given an M1 number. So M1, M2, etc. They're about to build a new medium tank they're going to call the M2. They realise, because of reports coming back from what's going on in Europe, it won't be good enough. The European observers from the American army, they've seen the Germans with a 75mm gun on their Panzer IVs. It's only small, short, but it's powerful. So they say you're going to need a 75mm gun. So they're about to start making the M2 tank, and they stop. And they say, no, we're going to do a new tank with a turret that's going to turn out to be like this one, the Sherman. It's going to have a 75mm gun. This famous later version of it's got the 76mm, but we're not ready yet. So they make an interim model tank called the M3, and that becomes, for Britain, the Grant tank, for America, the Lee tank. Now, other tanks, if you go in the museum, you'll see the French Char-B tank. That's got a gun in the hull as well. The first British Churchill, we saw the Mark III, that also had a howitzer in the hull. So the idea behind that is trying to find a way of putting a bigger gun on the tank until we're ready to make the new turret. And that new turret is designed with French help. The French have an engineer who's ordering tanks from the Americans in 1940 called Jean Monnet. He's brought out lots of engineers from France. France falls, of course, in June 1940, so they stay behind and they help the Americans put together the casting skills so they can make that new M4, the Sherman tank. Very thick armour, an extra inch welded on the front. This ends up giving it a layer of protection. Even that, the crews didn't think were enough, and sometimes they go and put concrete or sometimes even sandbags over the front. Same 75mm gun as a normal Sherman. They thought the high explosive was better on that than the later Sherman, our Fury one, where we put a bigger gun on. I say we, the Americans put the 76mm. It doesn't sound much in the difference. 76mm longer gun, a millimetre difference, the size of the hole at the end of the barrel, but it's a higher velocity gun. And one other tank he agreed on is a Sherman with a 105mm gun. Again, so that if they come across the German fortifications in the Siegfried line, they'd be able to pound those, whereas a normal tank gun might not be strong enough. So there's exceptions to the rule, but his overall aim, keep it simple, make a good, effective tank, and the Sherman certainly was. It's got to be easily repaired, maintainable. We've got a citizen army that they're not skilled specialists. They need to be able to keep these tanks going. They're not going to have an enormous amount of training time, so no point giving them very sophisticated kit if they don't know how to use it. And there's plenty of modern analogies where we can have very clever things, but absolutely no point if we can't get the best from it. And that's the thought behind the Sherman series of tanks. Of course, as the war goes on as they're building these tanks in America. Britain pays for the first big American tank factory to be built. Then we have Lend-Lease, so Roosevelt allows us to borrow tanks on the Never Never in the British military, and inevitably they start improving them throughout the production run. So this particular M4, it's got the twin diesel in the back, as opposed to many M4 Grand tanks that has a radial engine.
Now, yesterday I had the chance to catch up with Mr. William Bannister, who's a trustee of the museum and also an avid private collector. And he's got something very exciting news to share. But let's the man himself share it. Here we are now, back on the tank park and fresh off the arena. Mr. William Bannister, how was it?
A bit hot and sweaty.
Now, William, of course, is the owner of the Bannister Historic Armour Collection and also a trustee of the Tank Museum. Now, the reason we want to catch up with William, we are about to show a very special video. So can you just explain it for us, William?
I'm not sure it's so special, but we were approached a while back and somebody said to us, well, you could make a programme with Gavin, our engineer, and myself about restoring historic armoured vehicles. So they did what they call in the business a sizzle, which is about a 3.5 minute long promo video. And so we're going to show it to all of you. And if you like it, please say so, shout out, and we might be allowed to make a telly programme. Whole series, perhaps.
Fantastic. A star in the making, Mr. William Bannister. Roll the VT.
Not so sure.
The Crusader tank is a lightweight, highly manoeuvrable and fast tank for use in open warfare.
Crusader tanks are really famous in the early days of the Western Desert Campaign when the UK was all alone. At the end of the day, I mean, these are the equivalent of the Spitfire. You know, when we're up against it, 1941, nobody else was helping us in the Western Desert, and it's all we had.
My name's Gavin Barlow and I restore tanks. My customers are generally made up of private vehicle collectors. William Bannister is one of my best clients.
So where do we start with these two? What do you want to do first? I've worked a lot with Gavin as my engineer, and he is restoring all of the armoured vehicles that we're collecting, hopefully to preserve for the future.
The voltmeter's not working.
No, that's starting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right, let's get it going. Gavin's looked after my collection of tanks and armoured vehicles for nearly 10 years. Or perhaps it's just two big kids playing with Meccano on steroids.
William's latest project is a pair of Crusader II tanks from World War II. As a client, he's very, I wouldn't say picky, he knows what he wants.
It's going to take, what, a couple of years?
Probably each tank.
And currently, I'm saying? All right, okay.
The biggest challenge when restoring tanks is the unknown. I take all the armour off the side, and we had to use a mag drill to drill out every single bolt.
I mean, looking inside, she's empty, isn't she?
Yeah, this is one that was robbed of all the internal parts, and I mean everything in the crew compartment is completely empty. Even the data plate's missing, but it does have the Liberty engine and the gearbox in the back.
So we got the important bits. It's all possible, isn't it? It's just time and money. You've got the time, and I'll have to keep working.
I'd like to take engines out and maybe doing an engine build first.
Big engine rebuild. How long do you think that would take? You know, how long to be the string? You don't have the manuals or anything else, so all of that stuff, it becomes rather more difficult when you're 80 years on.
It is achievable, but it's
expensive. Yeah. It's not a project for the faint-hearted. To get something like this to running order, you're going to be spending £300,000 or £400,000 potentially, £250,000 up each. But I'm not going to think about that.
We genuinely have no idea what's wrong with it until we take it apart. That is the fear. We can strip all of these engines down. I say that really quickly.
Something's always going to go wrong. Come on, you know it always goes wrong.
We're going to have to talk to people that have worked on Crusaders before.
And there's not many of those around. These are the hardest to do yet, because British stuff is much harder to restore. There's a lot less of it around.
You could take an engine apart and find that it has a crankshaft snapped into. Where do you get a crankshaft from for a World War II tank?
If you've got no engine and no final drive, we've not got anything moving.
No, without an engine, you haven't got a tank.
When you think there's only 24 of them in existence.
None of them run at the moment.
No.
But with these two, they will be the only two runners
in the world.
In the world, I think.
It's daunting, isn't it?
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
Now, I know they'd love to hear your comments about that video, so if you do have anything you'd like to say about it, please put them in the comments section below. Now, there are loads of traders you can browse around the site at Tankfest. Richard, have you done any shopping yet?
Well, the children will, of course, expect me to return with gifts.
Good
so
man yourself.
hopefully after this.
There's books, there's militaria, models, all sorts of things. But one stall in particular caught my attention. Well, if you thought tanks and fine art didn't go together, you'd be very wrong indeed, because amongst all of the fine and varied trade stands that you can find at Tankfest, I've bumped into the fantastic Mick Graham, who's built up quite a following amongst Tankfest crowds. And Mick, how long have you been coming to Tankfest and displaying your works of art here?
This is my 10th year to pitch at Tankfest.
Yep.
And it's just grown and grown and grown. The feedback I get from people coming in is just astonishing. I love it when people come in and just keep pointing.
Yeah.
And they recall their memories
all
the time. And that's what motivates me to
keep
paint
going.
these things. Yeah, so I was an old school Cold War tanky. And that's what I thrive on, and everybody seems to love it. I didn't ask to be here, just ended up here. And it's just mind-blowing.
We had to wait for a few minutes to catch you because you were busy signing copies of your new book, which is also available from the Tank Museum shop. And this tells you, well, everything about your life and how you got into art, your military career, and your life after the military, which has involved a lot more paint than perhaps you thought it might have.
Yeah. I'm a squaddy brat. In other words, that's the term used affectionately for a child of a soldier. So my dad was RSM. When he left the army, and I followed in his footsteps. Not that I made RSM, he had a big set of boots to fill. But yeah, I dabbled in it on the tank park a little bit. There's one over there that a guy's actually bought to me this morning that I sold to him in '84 on the tank park.
Wow.
And he brought it in to show me because I haven't seen it for 40 odd years. And it was just mind blowing to see the progress from them days to what I do now.
Yeah.
Left the army in '93, became a forklift instructor on all your big machines, your 50-ton VNAs, cherry pickers, the whole lot. Did that for 20 years. My bones were starting to creak. And my wife, Marion, said, did you used to paint before I met you, Mick? And says, I dabbled in it, nothing serious. Just give it a go. Here I am about 12, 13 years later, and I just can't keep up.
And thank goodness she did. I mean, there's a fantastic selection of some of the pieces you've painted behind us. All tanks, that's obviously your chosen preferred subject. I can see Tiger 131 there. Are there any kind of particular favorites amongst the bunch here that we can see on the wall behind us?
I like the Lebanese one, all right? Because I like the story behind it. Because it used to belong to the Americans gave it to the British gave it to the French converted it, then it went to the Israelis, and then they gave it to Lebanese. And it's painted blue because it was in the Golan Heights. The theory was you look up, it blended in with the sky. It's a nice story to it.
I can see the Chieftain tank features quite heavily in your work. I'm guessing that's an old familiar vehicle from your service days.
Yeah, well, I ended up, I was a rubbish driver. All right, I didn't like my first exercise, Crusader in Germany. I bogged the tank, and my commander, the troop leader, wasn't happy. Before I knew it, I was in the gunner's seat, and I've never looked back, to the point where I became a gunnery instructor as well. I just love firing their machines, and these are my new ones up there.
So you're a big Chieftain fan, then? I think it's fair to say.
I did 15 years on Chieftain.
Yeah. So when did you get started? I mean, when did you paint your first picture?
The motorbike on the wall.
My goodness, yeah.
I did that at school.
That's incredible.
And that helped me pass my O-level art exam.
Yeah.
And the one under it is the current commission I've got for Operation Market Harbour.
All right, which shows the Well Foundation Jagdpanther.
That's the one.
Fantastic. And what's the plan with that piece of work? You're going to display it at Operation Market Harbour?
It's exclusive for Market Harbour. There'll be prints produced of it.
Brilliant.
Just there, but not here.
Brilliant. Well, if you'd like to find out more about the Mick Graham story, you can get a copy of his book. It's his life story and a big selection of some of his best pieces in here. Mick, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to meet you. I hope you have a fantastic weekend.
Thank you, folks.
You're watching Tankfest Online 2026, and a huge thank you, of course, to Mr. Graham there. What an incredibly talented man. I've been following for a number of years now, and of course, to make him even better and more credible, ex-tanky.
Had to be. Now, our next segment features even more fantastic World War II armour, including some of our special guests. We've got the Stug 3 from the World Foundation. We've got the Nashorn, which is come all the way from the Netherlands, and you may remember is the one that almost made it to Tankfest a couple of years ago. But before we go over to that display, earlier, I had a closer look at the Sherman Jumbo, one of our guests all the way from Belgium. You're joining me in a very hot tank park where one of our special guests has just arrived. I'm here with Pierre Muller from the War Heritage Institute over in Belgium. Pierre, tell us about this fantastic vehicle that you brought for us.
This vehicle is our Sherman M4A3E2 Jumbo. It's an American assault tank of the Second World War. In fact, it's a fat Sherman. He was made in 1944 as an assault tank.
And they're pretty rare, aren't they? They didn't convert or make many of these Sherman Jumbos.
How many? Less more than 254.
Wow, yeah.
And now in the world there are 9 exemplars, 2 in Europe, and this Jumbo is the only one in running condition in Europe.
And it's the first time we've ever seen a Sherman Jumbo here at the Tank Museum and here for Tankfest. But the first thing I noticed about it when you started the engine was just how incredibly noisy it was. So has this got a different sort of engine in it from the regular Shermans?
Yes, it's the same. Because it's 4GAA motors. It's the same motor than the M4A3 Sherman. The same motor. But yeah, this the Jumbo is a little. She's very fat, but she's slower than other version of the Sherman.
So very heavy, very slow. It's going to be fantastic to see her alongside some of the other Shermans that we've got in our collection that are visiting with us here today. And where can people actually see this vehicle? And most importantly, what's there's some interesting markings on the side. What are those in commemoration of?
Yes, the markings are the markings of the Sherman Jumbo Cobra King. Why? It's because the Cobra King was the first tanks in Bastogne during the Battle of the Bulge.
Famously rescuing the 101st, right?
Yes, indeed. But the original Cobra King is now in USA, in Fort Belvoir. Here it's a original Jumbo, but it's not the original first in Bastogne.
And the other thing you can really notice about the Jumbo is just how thick that armour is on the manlet of the gun there. And they're spinning the turret now, so we can get a really good look at that. But
yes, indeed, the turret is more armoured than the Tiger One, because for the mantlet, this is armour of 178 millimeter. It's more than one Tiger One.
Wow, that's incredible, incredibly heavy.
Yes.
And I just heard that this is your first visit to the Tank Museum, first visit to Tankfest.
Yes.
Is there anything in particular that you're looking forward to seeing this weekend?
To see, I am very curious about some vehicles here because it's an incredible location to see incredible vehicles. Also here I see the Nashorn. You have also a TOG tanks. It's very interesting, I think. But I love much the Mark IV tank because we have his brother in Brussels.
Yes, that's right.
Also,
Fantastic.
Yes. But
brilliant. Well, Pierre, thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you for bringing this amazing specimen of a vehicle. I hope you have a fantastic weekend.
An M5 Stuart tank. It's the upgraded version, new engine in the back, of the tank called the M3 Stuart that the British first used. The Americans give them to us. We use out in the Western Desert. We thought they were great because they were reliable, much more reliable it seemed than British tanks at the time. And famously a guy says, when he's asked after driving one, what do you think of it? And he says, sir, it's a Honey. And the name stuck. We often called the American Stuart the Honey tank. This is a later version, but as the war progresses, even a light tank doing its reconnaissance roles, they said, we want more punch. So it's followed by what starts in 1943 by Cadillac, who are already making the M5. They make a more powerful tank, the Chaffee, but the same role going ahead. They start thinking, let's putting little combinations together of lighter vehicles. So this is the version for reconnaissance with a 75mm gun. But actually they start building other things on top of that lighter vehicle. It's followed by, we've seen already, our Sherman done up as it was in the Fury movie. The Sherman, I've already mentioned, they wanted it to be a standard tank that could be very easily produced. They've upped the gun size. This has now got a 76mm gun on it. And we've already mentioned as well the jumbo with thicker armour, so it's got a different role. I'm now going to hand you to Chris, who's going to talk a little bit about the German vehicles coming on now.
All right, bringing up the rear, we have two German vehicles, the Stug 3 and the vehicle called the Nashorn, sometimes known as the Hornis. Now you may be noticing there's a bit of a difference between the American vehicles you've seen and the German vehicles. This is down to the fact that the Wehrmacht, as the war goes on, is facing different problems. The Allies, whether it's on the Eastern Front or in Europe, on the front foot, the Wehrmacht is very much on the back foot. So they're having to start to think defensively, and they're having to start to think about how they deal with this colossal weight of Allied armour. So both of those vehicles, both the Stug 3 and the Nashorn, they're effectively their Panzerjäger. One didn't start off like that, but that's what they evolved into. They evolve into tank killers. So the American vehicles, you're looking at them and you're thinking, yeah, these are very much about reconnaissance and going forward into attack. German vehicles, just look at the style of them. They are low slung. They are designed for defensive use, and they're designed to really strike from cover. Would you say that's about right, David?
And one thing we sometimes forget, even in wartime, money's important. That German Sturmgeschütz costs about a third or two-thirds the price of the turreted Panzer III. You're going to see the Panzer III later on today. So the Germans aren't stupid. They realise, hang on, we're making an effective tank destroyer, Panzerjäger like Chris said, with actually less money. And as early as 1943, the Germans realise Sturmgeschützes are knocking out more tanks than Tigers. So this is a really effective bit of kit if you want to spread your money around the place. But that idea of what's an attack tank, so the Sherman is there to exploit a gap made in the front line, its original design criteria. Don't try and fight other tanks, you might meet some. We've got tank destroyers for that, that's what they argue. Actually, tanks inevitably bump into other tanks. So people like, I mentioned that name, McNair, he's trying to say to the American tank crew, try not to get obsessed with fighting German tanks. Try to think of your key role with its exploitation. Now that gun, Chris will tell us about, that is one massive great gun that Hitler loved on the, you carry on, Chris.
I've got some figures to back that up, actually, for those of you who are into the account side of things. For a Stug, you can lash out 80,000 Reichsmarks. For a Tiger 1, it's over 300 to 350,000 Reichsmarks. So economically, these vehicles make a lot of sense. The Stug there, that is a Panzer III chassis, turret off, and it's got a Stug 40 7.5 centimeter gun in the front. Now, it didn't start out like that. It starts off as a Sturmgeschütz to assist infantry. It's an assault gun. But the short-barreled 75 is replaced with this long-barreled version, and it becomes a tank killer. Now, the Nashorn, the Hornis, that's a different kettle of fish. If you go into the museum, if you go into the Tank Story Hall, you will see a Pak-43. It's a massively powerful anti-tank weapon. It'll put a round through the frontal arm of just about any Allied tank 2.5 kilometers away, perhaps. But the trouble is, it's big and it's heavy. The crews called it the Schoentor, the barn door, because it's so damn difficult to maneuver around on its wheels. And you need something big to pull it, something like a Farmo, one of the big half-tracks. So what can we do to make that mobile? Well, let's stick it on a tracked chassis. And what they do, there's a vehicle in development called the Geschützwagen 3-4. And they're going to stick originally a howitzer on that, called it the Hummel, the Bumblebee. But then they think, well, hang on a second. We really try. If we move the engine to the center, if we lengthen the chassis, because it's a combination of parts assemblies from Panzer III, Panzer IV, and it's a slightly lengthened Panzer IV chassis. And they're able to put that huge gun on top of it. And it's very, very successful. On the Eastern Front particularly, they build just under 500 of these things. And on the Eastern Front particularly, when they're in use, they are able to take out things like T-34s en masse at distance. There are reports of these things knocking out T-34s 4.5 kilometers away. The problem with it, and when you go and have a look at it in the tank park, the upper works are very thin. They're only about a centimeter thick. That'll keep out small arms fire. Small bits of shrapnel won't do much else. And it's open-topped. So if you're in somewhere like Italy, mountainous zone, you're going to have problems with that. Now, I see we have the Honey coming back round. David, this is a tracked recce vehicle, isn't it? Are tracks good for reconnaissance? I've never really thought so, to be honest.
So this one as well, we're lucky to have here. We've got a range of armoured vehicles. Some belong to the Tank Museum. Some are privately owned that are housed here, and they're bringing them along so we can show you off that. Hornice that was going around just a little bit earlier has come all the way from the Netherlands. It's a bit of a restoration like many of these vehicles now. As you can imagine, as time moves on, that was actually put together from some parts that were found in the Kurland pocket. It's basically an area in that was being fought over and defended by the Germans. Wrecks of tanks there being dug up. That one particularly has a modern engine. It's got the steering system from a 432 armoured personnel in it. But again, it gives us that sense we can see, just like our First World War tanks, we're not going to run those because they're so rare. So the fact that we were able to put those 3 replicas out earlier on, that's another one of these things that, again, you know, we're not trying to hide it from anyone, you know, what's real, what's not. But to be able to have this range of very classic armoured vehicles going around, so you can see there the M5 version of the Stuart, the later version there as it runs around. Why is it done that way? Well, they actually started the Stuart earlier in the 1930s. And very early on, the Americans had an obsession about putting machine guns everywhere on a vehicle. It had 2 in the front by the driver. It ended up having another one in the turret. 37mm gun, which at the time it was copied from the German anti-tank gun that was 37mm. The Russian copied it too. And of course, after those early tank engagements, they realised it's not much good if you come across a proper German tank like a Panzer III. Hence the need to upgrade to
that 75mm gun that we're seeing now on the Chaffee as it moves off, that gun originally was designed to go in a Mitchell bomber. Can you believe that way? It was flying around with a gun on to fire at ships. And they realized it had got a very effective way of taking the recoil. Instead of recuperators, chambers, bit like a shock absorber, to take the recoil action, this one ends up with a circular system of taking the pressure off as that gun recoils, because they knew if they were putting on that on an aircraft, you don't want to shake the aircraft out the sky every time it fires. Cadillac, it's got a hydromatic gear change system. The guy, Harley Earl, who helped design this particular vehicle, goes on to design Cadillac cars in the 50s, famous for all the fins on the back. So you've got some really important American names in engineering helping putting these designs together. So this gets out to Europe. Again, most tanks, this is done quite quickly because they're dealing with people that knew what they were on about. Gets to Europe at the end of 1944, and it first sees action with American forces around the time of the Battle of the Bulge. So, and it goes on, like so many of those World War II vehicles, they see much further and longer service, Korean War, etc. And again, they're very sensible that way because they build other types of vehicles on top.
If I can just butt in there, one little fact about the Chaffee. Not Korean War, but the French in Indochina. Anybody heard of a place called Dien Bien Phu? Yep. The French were establishing a remote base supplied by air. They wanted to get armor in there. They hadn't got the heavy lift capability to take a tank, so they took 10 Chafees apart and air freighted them in and reassembled them on the battlefield. They used them basically until they were all knocked out. They carried on using them as static pillboxes.
So with the Sherman going around, again, without, I hope, confusing you, one of these things, why is it an M1 Sherman? Why is it an M4 Sherman? So all Shermans are M4s. M4A1 is a cast hull. In other words, it's molded, it's not welded together. M4A2 has the twin diesel engine in. The M4A3, we end up using different engine types. So we're giving those different names. M4A4 has got that multi-bank engine where Chrysler comes along, bolts a whole series of engines together around a common crankshafts. That's got 5 of the engines there to do that. Means the hull has to be made a bit longer. And this is to match because they can't make enough of the original design. Has got something like an R95 radial engine in. And the problem you've got there, it's the same engine that's powering aeroplanes. And if you're building lots of bombers, fighters, etc., everyone's after the same thing. Hence this diversion of different engine types, which leads us to have all these different bits and pieces in terms of after there. So, you know, if you want to learn every last one, become a tank nerd, but don't worry about it. Just call it a Sherman. You get away with it.
Supply is a big part of the story there. And the other side of things is just the competitiveness between American industry. You have got vast industrial capacity. You've got Ford, you've got Chrysler, you've got railway works. Do they want to build other people's stuff? Do Chrysler want to make Ford engines? Do they? Hell. Consequently, rather than rejigging to make another engine, what they do is build their own. Somebody asked me the other day, what engine does a Sherman tank have in it? And I just said, well, which one? You've got 5 different. And then you've got different hull types as well. You've got cast, welded, composite. It is quite complicated, but it works. 50,000 Shermans in their various marks. I mean, this is, in my opinion, with the T-34, this is one of the 2 tanks that won World War II.
Welcome back to Tankfest Online 2026, and you may have noticed we have now moved across the arena to catch up with the first of our very live arena shows, Battlefield Machines, an explosive illustration of battlefield tactics.
But before we throw over to the arena, I can't think of a better time to remind you, if you're enjoying what you see, tickets for next year's Tankfest are available now at tankmuseum.org.
So I will be very quick. As you can see behind us, there are some vehicles moving and we need to get a move on here. Just a quick reminder for everybody on Twitch right now, you are still able to get Twitch drops. So after 60 minutes, you have a chance of crew books or the Badger 3D style called Mordred or a Tier 8 premium tank, the ST66. After 120 minutes, it's a Tankfest token store tokens where you can get commanders like Richard Cutland here or even some other in-game goods, which is amazing. Helps you get some better RNG. After 180 minutes, you have a chance of personal reserves, the IS-4 Granite 3D style, or the Tier 9 French premium tank, the Char MLE. And I think that's everything from me right now. I believe we can now cut to the live show where you can see the vehicles getting into stage. So thank you very much, and we'll be back shortly.
The German army was very... To the Soviet Union in 1941, it was known as the Army Door Knocker, because as soon as it came up against T-34s and KV-1s, well, that's all it really did. It sort of just knocked on the side, and that's not really much more than that. However, it is an anti-tank gun. It will fire an armor-piercing round, and against light armor or flanking shots against light tanks, it's an anti-tank gun. It will do damage. I wouldn't necessarily like to be behind the gun screen on that one, though. And following up the pack, we have everybody's favorite, kind of overcomplicated bicycle, the Kettenkrad. If you see in the back there, a couple of infantrymen with a rather large anti-tank weapon. That is going to be the real problem for Allied armor. As they were pushing through this period, the Panzerschrecks and the Panzerfausts were really, really problematic. The ambush positions the Germans could get themselves into, hit the flanks of any Allied column, really was causing havoc. You've got to remember, by 1945, the Germans are fighting in their backyard. It would be like the British Army fighting on Salisbury Plain or here on the Bovington training areas. They're going to know every nook, cranny, bush, with a bit of woodlock, divot in the terrain. They're going to know where it is, especially if you end up actually, as the British had to do, fighting their way through training areas. Right, what are they up to? That is a deployment of an anti-tank weapon. They're clearly setting up some sort of rear guard, I reckon. That's the Kettenkrad moving into position. You don't want to get that thing in a firefight, but it's brilliant at dropping troops off and getting out of there again. At this time, you're not going to want to commit all of your force, so the heavier side of this formation is probably going to bug out. Done a bit of reconnaissance, nothing's really happening, but they know Allied forces are coming this way. It is an inevitability, and more than likely going to be armor in there somewhere. The Germans are very good at doing this sort of fighting withdrawal from line to defensive line to defensive line, which makes it really difficult to weed them out and push them back. You are going to need to break them and exploit the break as soon as possible. So these vehicles are all bugging out. They don't want to be part of the main, or the initial assault, I should say. They're being held back for that main assault. More than likely, if I was the German Kampfgruppe commander, going to be setting up another line of defense, because all that anti-tank gun and that handheld anti-tank weapon is supposed to do is delay. Rough them up a bit, make them think twice, maybe push them in a different direction, hold them up. But we'll see what happens there. Have they made the correct decision? Well, you've got to remember as well, our arena is an arena. It isn't a full-on battlefield. So the ranges are going to be much exaggerated. Terrain, we don't really have any. We have a bit of a hill, and it's a brilliant hill, and we love the hill, but it isn't what you're going to be finding in a realistic environment. They're going to be using that terrain, that wood block, hiding as best as possible. Here comes the Allied recce formations. We've got the two extremes of how to do reconnaissance in the Second World War. The utility vehicle, the Jeep, ubiquitous with Allied victory. It is really very versatile. It's quite good at providing a very light, small, nimble reconnaissance force. Then there's a command car, a bit of a motorized runner, as it were, taking messages to where they need to go. And as you can see, ours is packing a little bit of extra firepower on top of it, which may or may not come in handy. Behind it, the other end of the spectrum, a Chaffee. Late war, American light tank. Built for that reconnaissance role, it packs a punch though. It is lightweight, there's not much armor, but it is rapid, and it has a 75mm. First American light tank, the M3 Stuart, has a 37mm. That is now the same caliber as the medium tank, the Sherman. It's not quite the same gun. That one was developed to operate off of the bottom of a bomber. Well, it's a bit more successful in the Chaffee, and here's what we're going to see today. Behind that, we have a Deuce and a Half. The iconic American truck of this period. Very good at going long distances, transporting, well, basically anything you'd ever want. Today, we have a shed load of infantry in the back. These armoured formations are useless without infantry providing flank security. Oh, dear me. That is the anti-tank gun opening up. The ambush has been sprung. You don't want to hang about in an unarmoured truck for particularly long. British infantry are deploying. They're having to get down. The Germans are pinning them down. If you look up on the mound, they've got into their second defensive position as well. This is potentially now the British are being flanked, which is, you know, less than ideal. A fierce firefight is now breaking out. Allied formations can't really move. You're going to have to rely on the armour from now on. They're going to have to force their way through. That Jeep is taking a bit of a risk, but that Chaffee is hoping its armour's going to do the job. That is quite close and personal for a light tank. That does appear to be a successful hit. The Pak 36 is still opening up. That Chaffee is now suspiciously quiet, so potentially they have just got very, very lucky with that Pak 36. That truck is not going to hang around in the firefight. It will get blown to smithereens particularly quickly. That is getting out of there, letting the infantry fight the Germans on foot. These two formations have bolt-action rifles. There may be a bit of extra fire support coming. The Germans are dropping something on the British positions. One thing about planning your defensive lines means you can plan in the artillery to come down when you're being attacked. This will all be pre-registered. Now, this is quite important. We've brought in reinforcements. Not only the armoured vehicles that you see, the Dingo with its Bren gun opening up. We've got the Stuart M5 with its 37mm opening up. Plus, if you can see, in and amongst that infantry, there is another Bren gun. By this point, in history, the entire British infantry unit was built around getting that rapid-firing Bren gun into action. If that Bren gun ran out of ammunition, and as an infantryman, you had ammunition, suddenly the Bren gun had more ammunition. The Germans have fallen back. The overwhelming Allied men and material is taking its toll on these Germans. They're falling back. They're going back to their second defensive line. Unfortunately, the Germans have been given a little bit of time to repair. They're now pretty dug in. They've got some nice cover there. This is going to be difficult for the Allies to be able to weed them out. Everybody's trying to keep their heads down. If you listen carefully over the rather large amount of gunfire we've got going on here, you will hear the infantry absolutely screaming at each other, different orders, different movements, where they're going. This is not the time for subtlety. You're going to be firing your weapon, keeping that enemy head down while you try to advance through the battlefield. Usually here we say at the Tank Museum, in that recce vehicle like the Dingo, you don't want to be firing your main gun. Something's gone horribly wrong. But if you're supporting infantry, pinning enemy infantry down, that is exactly where a little lightweight bulletproof vehicle with a machine gun is going to come in vital. It's all a bit cagey now. No one wants to necessarily make a move. The Germans know it's the Allies' move to make. But at the same time, they're not just going to want to sit there and take it. They're probably planning something else. That being said, we've got more Allied armor in the field now. This isn't just the recce force anymore. This is the tank battalion, tank regiment coming forward. We've got 2 Chaffies in our arena, which apart from, well, Friday and Saturday, I don't think has ever happened before. With Sherman Fury behind it, that is the most powerful gun on the battlefield. Sherman gets a lot of stick, but in this situation, you probably wouldn't want to be in much else. It does appear the Germans are making their move. To quote one of my colleagues, there are 3 inevitabilities in life: death, taxes, and German counterattacks. This is the German counterattack. If I was the Allied commander, I would be expecting this. We played into that. We knew the Germans would inevitably counterattack. Where, how, or when was the question. While the armor moves into position, the infantry are making moves. Because while that Panzer III isn't necessarily the best tank on the battlefield, it is still a tank on the battlefield. And that 5cm main gun is going to rip a hole through most of what we've got here today. That 20mm on the 222, the armoured car, is going to help with that suppressive fire as well. The infantry are reasonably well protected, but they are just trying to make movements. They're using the armoured vehicles as physical barriers occasionally as they move forward. Does appear the Panzer III is getting into a position to fire. Who at? I'm not sure. That is a very large explosion. Oh! Just shots are being exchanged here. The maelstrom of battle. No one really knows who's shooting at who, who's getting the kill. Does it really matter? I don't think it does. You are going to keep firing. Both sides have a reasonably target-rich environment at this point. Because of the enemy armoured counterattack, the Allied armour can't really assist the infantry, so at the moment they're on their own. Germans are falling back yet again. We are slowly pressing them into a smaller and smaller pocket here. They've clearly had enough. They're getting out of there. This force is just too large for what they have in their arsenal at the moment. They're trying to get out. They're trying to leave the battlefield. But Allied armour is mobile. That Chaffee especially is absolutely rapid. And a Sherman's not too sluggish either. Does appear we've outflanked them. They cannot escape. And no matter how good that half-track is at moving its infantry around the battlefield, when it comes face-to-face with a 75mm and a 76mm main gun, it's not going to stand a chance. You can see the infantry are moving around the back to support the Allied thrust forward. You're going to need to keep up with them. You don't want to isolate your armour or allow your armour to be isolated. The 1st Chaffee and the M5 are moving through the middle of the arena to directly support the infantry advance. There's a lot of shooting, but we have flanked them. They've cut off their lines of communication, their way of retreating. There is no real hope for the Germans at this point. It is now just a matter of when and how. Allied armour is moving around in support. We're going to need to keep them pinned in as much as possible. Armour in this situation is fantastic. It will provide you that mobility, that protection, that firepower to bring the fight to the enemy. But when it comes weeding them out of foxholes, in place positions, bits of building that they've managed to acquire, you are going to need boots on the ground and infantry moving forwards. For many men, it was the case of going in there bayonets fixed. You can see the Bren gun being used to great effect over there, really pinning down any attempt at the Germans at moving anywhere. That doesn't mean they're going to give up. They're going to fight all of the way, hopefully try and break out the pocket. They were pretty good at this, being encircled and keep fighting. Any sliver of hope, so the Allies have to be careful. You'll see a few of the soldiers here firing either their Bren gun or their rifle from the hip. This isn't them trying to be cool. This is a tried and tested method of keeping the enemy's head down while you're potentially quite exposed. Even now we've got the lighter armour moving up. That Bren gun on the Dingo is going to be helpful. And the Browning on the back of the Jeep there. Well, at the end of the day, it is a very large machine gun. The infantry may well need picking up as well, so the truck's going to hang around just in case we need a speedy exit. Fury's going to bring herself around just to completely cut off and isolate the German forces here. There is no way they can escape. Surely not. All a bit cagey. Who's going to make the move? The Allies don't really have the time to wait for the Germans to try and break out. They're going to have to go in hard. Purple smoke is being dropped. That is for airstrikes coming in, hopefully. 2nd Tactical Air Force is an absolutely immense formation that can be called upon. Why go in there on foot when you can soften them up with air power and artillery? Signalling smoke, covering smoke, smoke from artillery going off, explosions. It is just chaos. But that chaos can be exploited. The infantry are slowly squeezing the Germans tighter and tighter into this pocket. They're bringing every single weapon to bear now. You've got to keep them moving. Panzer III is knocked out. 222 is knocked out. I don't think that half-track's going anywhere either. Oh, they've given up. The Germans are legging it. That's the problem. You may have them surrounded, but pockets of infantry can still escape. I mean, that works both ways, to be fair. That's exactly what we did at Arnhem. A number of the infantry got out in small groups at night. So clearly the Germans have picked something up from their fighting on the Eastern Front as well. What you're going to have to do now, you've got to be really careful when taking this position. The Germans would have booby-trapped it. Almost certainly. They would not give up their ground easily. Those infantry are going to have to be careful, but they are going to have to clear that position. And they're going to have to fight through it. What they don't want to do is hang around in this position for, well, any longer than they really need to. Remember what I said earlier about pre-registered artillery? Well, yes, it's here. So they're going to have a few minutes before the Germans are going to be able to call down artillery straight onto this position. Which means you fight through, potentially even get to the next German defensive line before you can take a breather. And let's be honest, there are no breathers at this point in the war. It needs to be over. We need to keep the Germans on the back foot. So the infantry, they're all getting back into their respective vehicles as quickly as possible. Move on, next objective. This was a utterly resounding victory for the Allied forces, but this is not the end of the war. They will keep having to fight and fight and fight. What these vehicles are going to do now is they're going to have one big victory lap around the arena a couple of times. Please give them a round of applause. Our Allied forces, brought to you by History in the Making. Hope you've enjoyed what you've seen here. All these vehicles are going to now filter out onto the tank park if you've not seen that one already. These vehicles are a mixture of ones from the Tank Museum, from the William Bannister collection, and from History in the Making themselves. Where else are you going to see this amount of Second World War armour on display in a reenactment? We are the Tank Museum, you are at Tankfest, but it isn't just tanks. You need the infantry, you need the armoured cars, you need the trucks, the lorries, the jeeps. Everything needs to come together to achieve what you just saw there. And by 1945, the Allies were exceptionally good at this sort of warfare, combining everything together. It is a common fact that the Germans, as you saw, were very good at forming Kampfgruppe, battle groups, impromptu formations to achieve a goal with various different assets. What gets overlooked is the British and the Americans are very good at doing exactly the same thing, arguably sometimes a little bit better. You aren't necessarily going to want to leave the arena too soon. After this, we have got some big guns coming out as we move into the Cold War. That's not to say any of these vehicles are not Cold War vehicles, because even though they were built in the Second World War, both Fury, well, the type of vehicle that Fury is, and Chaffee served long into the late 40s and early 50s.
You're at the Tank Museum for Tankfest 2026, and my goodness, wasn't that an exciting display? So a big thank you to our reenactors, ably directed by Hamish MacLeod from History in the Making, who I only found out the other day was very much involved in the Sharp series of the 1990s, which will only make sense to British viewers of the show. Were you a big fan of Sharp yourself?
I loved it. One of my favourite shows to watch.
Cracking. Watch it through every year.
Yeah, I try. So Nick, I have to ask before I introduce the next bit, where did you get the cool shirt from?
Well, I thought you'd never ask, David, but shirts like this was actually designed by Ella, our in-house designer. And as you can see, it's got the Tank Museum logo on it there. Sorry. Oh, the camera adds 10 pounds. This is a dangerous look. But you can get hold of one yourself at tankmuseumshop.org. And remember, the Tank Museum is a registered charity, so every penny you spend helps support our work.
So I need to read this next name so I get it right, because I would like to introduce James Donaldson and Kirsten from World of Tanks Modern Armour. Many of you will know as KB, and what they're going to do is take you as a quick run through the VCC, or the Vehicle Conservation Centre, or as I like to call it, the Cave of Wonder.
The Cave of Wonder, I like that.
I'm Kirsten, and today I'm here in the VCC with James, who is going to take us on a brief tour, point out some tanks, and tell us all about the VCC.
So yeah, the VCC for the Tank Museum is really important. It's not just a shed, built just over 10 years ago, and for the first time it allowed all of our tanks to be under cover, which in Dorset with the sea air is really important to prevent corrosion and keep these things in as good a condition as possible. Right now we're probably less than 100 vehicles in here, give or take.
Just about.
Yeah, if we were to remove any walking space of any description, we could probably push it to about 140 in here.
That's a lot of tanks.
Yeah, when we've got over 350 vehicles in the collection, we do need that space.
You absolutely do.
As we're walking past here, we've got our replica A7V, got a couple of vehicles from Iraq and Afghanistan at the bottom there.
And I recognise Chieftain here.
Yes, we believe this is the only Mark II remaining. For many years we called it the Mark V, but actually it was never a Mark V. It's a gunnery training tank, or gunnery trials tank, we think, that was a Mark II. Crazy Horse is my favourite tank in here. It is a remote-controlled Chieftain, because what more could you want from life, really, than a
remote-controlled life-size tanks? I'd take one home today if I could.
Exactly. So here we've got a bunch of prototypes that almost take you on that story from Centurion to Chieftain and into Challenger. So it's a really important group of vehicles. Not that we have time to talk about them, because that would be an hour in itself, I reckon.
I think it'd be more. I recognise so many tanks in here.
So we've got just so many different engines. We use them as reference pieces. These are not running engines. We've got stuff like this, the 438 swing fire, when you, again, want a 432 to kill things quite quickly. But yeah, it's anything from Cascavel, which is still in service, to the Boarhound, which only about 22 were ever made, and this is part of our core collection.
So what is your core collection?
Yeah, so the collection breaks down into 3 parts, effectively. We've got the core, which are vehicles we don't run, that we probably only have one of or are really important, like, as I said, the Boarhound, or I think our BRDM1 here is core collection.
What about the Bulldog?
Yeah, that's core, because we don't have another one. Hybrid is a mixture, well, it is core vehicles that we run, like Tiger, like Panzer III, I think even 4005 is technically hybrid. And then we've got our running fleet, which are vehicles specifically procured sometime, we buy them in or we've been donated them for the running fleet. So they don't sit in the collection, they sit for your viewing benefit, basically.
Of course, of course. And I see a scimitar in front of us.
Yeah.
In fact, I see 2 scimitars in front
We've
of
got
us.
basically the entire CVRT family here. The Scimitar Mark I, Mark II, which was built for the Wars on Terror to give the crew a little bit more mine protection. And we've got literally every single variant of CVRT and CVRW in the VCC at the moment.
And I believe we're walking past a Stritzfarn.
Yes. Our Resident S tank, absolutely brilliant bit of kit. It is a tank. I will fight anyone who says it isn't. But really interesting about that one was it was in our tank factory exhibition for near enough 10 years.
Yes.
And we got the Swedes over, they came over, helped us sort of have a look at the gas turbine and the diesel engine, and it drove out after 10 years on its own power.
That's incredible.
Which is really cool. We've got, it's not a Chieftain, it's a Khalid, which is arguably the best Chieftain ever, because it's a Chieftain with a
about that one, yeah.
with a Challenger engine in the back. Really quite good.
Leopard 1.
Yep.
Which version?
It's one of them. Leopard 1A, 1A2, I think. It's our German Leopard. We'll leave it at that. This is quite cool. It used to run around the arena, but it's a T55 with holes cut in the side of it for train the commanders.
Oh,
East
okay.
German was given to us post-German unification, I believe. A couple of important vehicles here to note as well. BTR, which is our only BTR, absolutely
BMP-1.
vital vehicle, and a BMP-1 from Iraq 1991 with the original paint scheme on it, with the original shrapnel
That's
marks.
Pretty incredible.
So it came straight off the battlefield here. And this, I'm sure
I do recognise
you
KV1.
and all the viewers will recognise that thing. And we believe, due to a rather large, hefty book that's come out recently, this is the most complete KV1 left on the planet.
You know what?
Quite
I
cool,
wander
really.
this hall, well, Conservation Centre, pretty much every year I come down for Tankfest. and I still learn something new every time.
Oh, I do, and I work here. You know, we've got stealth tank in here. We've got various different prototypes of getting from Chieftain to Challenger. That's our aluminium Chieftain there. This is a remnant of the T-34-76 that came over alongside the KV-1 actually as an evaluation thing. So the Army obviously cut it into several pieces.
Of course they did.
Various engines and gearboxes and a tank without a main gun. There's a strobe light instead, because the idea was you blind the enemy, basically.
Well, if you blind them, they cannot see what's getting them afterwards.
Exactly. I just wouldn't want to be in the tank that's doing the blinding.
Oh, no, me neither.
Yeah. So as you can see down here, if you can see on just on the shelving, the amount of guest vehicles that we have, the amount of vehicles that we put out for event days, they all require their own signage. So
lots of signage about that.
So much signage. Bunch of random vehicles in here. Sentinel, obviously known for very mature reasons.
Incredibly mature reasons that we do not need to go into.
I'm not a child, it's fine.
We're all children, really.
Yeah, universal carriers, various Vickers Armstrong things from the interwar period, the last British light tank of the Second World War, the Harry Hopkins. It's not very good.
No, but neither's this one coming up, is it?
No, this is probably the worst tank. David Fletcher definitely said it. Absolutely, it's the worst tank. The driver got in this thing, the Valiant, drove it for about 13 miles and then went, I'm never doing that again.
Wow.
I liked my limbs, as it turns out. This is actually a relatively new item in our collection. That's robotics, because that's something we're now having to look at as in museums. How do we collect robotics? What do we look at? You know, the autonomous battlefield needs preserving as much as anything else. Guys can see there, one of my favourite pieces of engineering, when you strap, I think it's 6 straight 5s around a single crankshaft. Because when
Sounds
you need
American.
Yeah.
Chrysler by any chance?
Yes, Sherman M4A4, the most used by the British.
Of course. We did like adapting those tanks.
You can never have a tank museum without a helicopter. Obviously, many people ask,
why?
What? Yes. Because back in the day, the Royal Armoured Corps in the Cold War period had an air wing. They used reconnaissance in those things, which I don't think would have lasted particularly long against the Russians, but well, we had them.
So what I'm hearing here is that was drones before drones?
Yes. The idea of having observation from the air is now just a hell of a lot safer, really, for everybody else involved.
Yes.
That is a very cool bit of collection, procured for the running fleet. It is one of the post-war Hetzers. So it's not a Hetzer, but it's close enough.
It's close enough to
close
a Hetzer.
enough that we can run it around the arena.
I have quite a few people who would be very interested in that.
Yes.
But thank you for this lovely tour. I'm sure everybody at home has enjoyed it as well. And thank you again for pointing out so many of the wonderful tanks.
Yeah, and I was only allowed like 6 minutes, so we could have kept going for like 2 hours if you let me.
Oh, well, that's a shame. Shall we go back?
Yeah.
This absolute behemoth is FV4005, also sometimes referred to as the Death Star, the Doom Barn, and another nickname which we can't in good conscience say in this video. It was a testbed vehicle made to trial the colossal 183mm gun, which was intended to be mounted on a tank called FV215. This was essentially a reconfigured Conqueror hull designed to mount this massive gun. The FV4005 was built on the Centurion chassis, which was smaller but still suitable for trial purposes. Whilst FV4005 was never intended for mass production, its gun was designed to take on Soviet heavy tanks. After the Soviets showed off their impressive-looking IS-3s at the Berlin Victory Parade in 1945, and with tensions rising between the East and West, the British wanted to be ready in case of another war in Europe. It wasn't designed necessarily to take on IS-3, but to take out whatever the Soviets would develop next. If the British would eventually be fighting these big tanks, they'd need a big gun to take them out, and so the Ordnance QF 183mm was born. A standard Centurion has a crew of 4, a driver, gunner, loader, and commander. But FV4005 has one additional crew member, and that's a second loader. The ammunition for the 183mm gun was truly massive. The projectile and propellant had to be loaded separately. This gun was designed to fire only one type of round, HESH, high explosive squash head, an ammunition type which the British Army still use today. The Hesh projectile used with the 183mm gun weighed a whopping 65.8 kilos, and the propellant cases weighed another 30.7 kilos. With all this heavy ammo and with 2 loaders, FV4005 could fire at a rate of 2 rounds per minute, which is just one of the many reasons the project was ultimately cancelled. Whilst the gun had truly devastating firepower, it didn't seem worth it when guns like the L7 105mm were entering service, which could fire far more than 2 rounds per minute and was still more than capable of dealing huge amounts of damage to enemy armour.
The FV4005 was the star of the show at Tankfest in 2024, and it is going to be part of our next display. Now, you might remember that FV4005 was brought back to life in a 3-way project between the Tank Museum, World of Tanks, and Mr. Hughes. And it was very successful, and we have an interesting announcement coming up about another project that we're going to be working on together. So more about that later on.
Lovely to see FV4005. As I said, at the moment, we are just waiting for it. There you go. It's actually just about to trundle on to the arena.
Right on cue.
Right on cue. How about that? So this next live arena display is actually called We're Going to Need, funny enough, a Bigger Gun. And it's all about the development of these tanks to face new threats after the Second World War. So without further ado, let's go live to the arena.
And already the West is starting to fall out with the Soviet bloc countries. So we're starting to design vehicles with guns on that are going to have to take on the new enemy, which is potentially the Soviet Union. And we know they've got massive tanks, so we think we're going to need a massive gun. And to lead this parade on now is the biggest ever gun fitted in a direct fire role on a tank chassis. This is never going to go into production like this, but it is still the biggest one that they've ever used that way. This is FV Fighting Vehicle 4005, and it's been part of a restoration project. Some of you here may have helped. Huge, great big 183mm gun on the top there. Now, I mentioned the word ammunition. For tanks knocking out other tanks in the Second World War, the main way we did it is having a solid piece of very dense metal. Britain, America, we had access to tungsten. In Germany, it was called wolfram, but they couldn't get enough of it. They were importing it from Spain. They ended up doing a sort of, we're not going to sell Spain any oil if they didn't stop selling tungsten. We had to stop Sweden from giving special iron ores and alloys to Germany as well. Tungsten, really dense metal, twice the density of steel. Put that in the center of your round and it's got great penetration. At the same time, other ideas are coming along for knocking out tanks. Hollow charge weapons. You've seen the Panzerfaust. We have the Pier in Britain. And Britain comes up with another weird one called high explosive squash head. And over at Fort Halstead in Kent, they come up with a very thin casing like a high explosive round, packed inside with plastic explosive. And the idea of that type of round, if you fire it at a tank, it doesn't have to have a lot of welly behind to penetrate the armour. It squashes on the side of the enemy's tank, and a detonator at the back, just after it's squashed on, a millisecond later, detonates the plastic explosive. And it sends a shockwave through the tank's armour, means a whopping great scab flies off on the inside. And it's also good for knocking down pillboxes or buildings, so we like it in Britain. And we fire HESH rounds in our tanks right up to recently. We'll see that the issue there with the British Army a bit later on. And that's the type of round they test in that whopping great big 183mm gun. FV4005, it gets overtaken by events. It's not that it's a bad idea, but all of a sudden another weapon system comes on that seems to do the same job better, the missile. We don't need quite as big a gun, they were saying, and also it was starting to cost a lot of money. The government cancels the project, so it never gets to see action, but still a bit of a wow factor rarity, the biggest one ever put on for direct fire on a tank. Now, after the Second World War, the Americans, we've had the nuclear bomb, they've now built up a really big strategic air force. America takes its foot off the idea of developing tanks. There's a bit of work going on, not that interested, we've got other things to fight wars with. And then all of a sudden, what kicks off in 1950 is the Korean War. And for the first time, the Americans, well, not even the first time, for another time, the Americans are suddenly found wanting. They need kit quickly. They are literally getting World War II tanks like the M26 Pershing tank. They're taking them off plinths to reactivate them to send them off to Korea. They've got a couple of tank projects on the go. One is using the hull of the M26 and put a new turret on the top. And we've actually got the tank that comes out there on our mound at the moment, the M47. They put a 90mm gun in it. So again, back to slightly bigger than the World War II German gun. They put it together in a hurry in the early 1950s to go to Korea. Doesn't work very well. It is not a success. So that as a tank was given away quickly by the Americans, and if you're looking at it there on the mountain, you might recognize it from loads of war movies in the 50s and 60s, because basically 99% of the production was given away to other countries. They moved straight on to another tank, the M48 instead. Now, FV4005, as you see as it's moving round there, such a big gun, it needs a cradle on the front to stop the gun waving around, a couple of tons worth there, so you don't want that rocking on what's called the trunnions, the bits that are holding it in the turret. And it's even got an anchor on the back that they drop into the ground if it was going to fire. Bit of a danger if you fire at 90 degrees from the hull because there's so much recoil. They test it with a loading assist equipment. It's basically not an auto loader, but two-part ammunition. In goes the round, that's rammed in, and then followed by a massive brass case full of the explosive to blast that 183mm round out. The armoured box on the top wasn't really meant for a turret. It was just to house it, to see how big a space the crews would need to actually work on the inside. But as that vehicle goes off, we've got the Centurion now driving round. And I mentioned that as the tank that at the end of World War II Britain develops starts off with a 17-pounder gun on. So that was 77.2 millimeters, the same gun that was on the Sherman Firefly. Very effective, very quickly, because they designed it with upgrades in mind, we had the next generation gun on called the 20-pounder. And one of these weird things comes along as well, just like the Korean War, that shakes everyone up. And that was in 1956. In Budapest, Hungarian uprising is going on, and the Hungarians get hold of a Russian T-54A tank and drive it into the British Embassy compound. And it gives the defence attaché a chance to measure the thickness of the frontal armour on what would be the enemy's tank, potentially, if the Cold War became a hot war, and look at the size of the gun. And it frightens NATO. We are worried now the 20-pounder on our Centurions is not going to be good enough. So again, over at Fort Halstead in Kent, they quickly come up with a new design gun. It's going to be called the L7 105mm gun. And they end up using that. They fit it the same size as the 20-pounder. It goes straight on the Centurions, just like this one. And that 105mm gun, with new types of ammunition, can penetrate that T-54, and it's so much better, it actually makes some other guns that are already in service, or even bigger, it makes them redundant. And it is a very effective bit of kit. We start putting them on our Centurion tanks towards the end of the 1950s. The Americans copy us straight away. And that's what makes some of these earlier American tanks, like the M47, M48, we're going to see the M60 at a moment, those become redundant. The M60, they're starting to build it in America. They're doing this progression of what they call pattern tanks. The M48 looks very much like the M47 driving around, but it's better, it's more reliable, it's bigger. And the M60 that we've seen, that sandy coloured one, same thing. It looks the same sort of tank, but on steroids. They're just getting them bigger each time. But this time, the Americans, they do a gunnery trial, 6 guns. What one's the best? The British L7 105mm gun. So that's the one they build under license and put on their M60 tanks. Now, one of the things the Americans experimented with, they're trialling 90mm gun on the M47. If you look on the front of the turret, 2 little round balls it looks like. That actually contains, across the front of the turret, there's a rangefinder. If you can work out the exact distance the enemy are away, instead of World War II, 1 round over, 1 round under, if you're lucky the 3rd round's on target, that helps judge the distance, so you've got more chance of a first round hit. And ironically, when those M47s were given away to other armies and had the chance of being improved, they did very well. The Italian army once won the Canada Cup, which was basically the sort of tank gunnery competition between all the Allied nations, who can hit the most targets accurately in the quickest time. So those American building this series of tanks, we can see the M60 driving around now. There were always aspirations, as there always is, for new technology to go on a vehicle, but it's never ready in time. And the Americans had a new type of armor. They wanted steel with silica glass in between as a sandwich. That was going to be more effective against certain types of incoming rounds. Not ready in time. So that's why you see this Whopper now with great big bits of cast armour still on it. Great big cast turret, cast hull as well. Now, for this generation, they put in a huge, great big diesel engine in the back. And these tanks as well, over 8,000 made, actually more than that on the M60s, sold or passed on all around the world. Lots of them still in service. They're still being used by the Egyptians. The Turkish army has many of them at the moment. Used by the Americans in the first Gulf War, by the US Marines as well. And it was it was a reliable tank, but not particularly exciting for many people. It had got a good gun, reasonable armour, a reasonable reliability, but it certainly wasn't at the cutting edge in any way. And in the end, again, the Americans replaced this by the famous Abrams tanks, and most of these were finally given away. Some went to the National Guard units. So the British gun, in essence, on that tank, and on the side of the turret as well, British smoke dischargers, those funny little banks of tubes to fire out patterns of smoke grenade. Now this other one was made in designed in 1950 as well, as part of that response to the Korean War. This is the American heavy tank, the M102. So when the debate was going on in America about what would be the best way of knocking out a tank, most of the time tank guns, many of them had come from anti-aircraft guns, because the whole idea of the anti-aircraft gun, it's got to fire at a target way up in the air, so it leaves lots of welly behind the round. With this 120mm gun there, it comes from something called the stratosphere gun. It could fire a round up to 60,000 feet up in the air. So they have a go with that on this enormous casting, 120mm gun. We actually copy that gun from the Americans. We put it on our Conqueror tanks. And that's what's so ridiculous about it all, because it was powerful, it was big. They have to do a huge turret. Look at the size of that turret to cope with that gun. 2-part ammunition, 2 loaders needed again. And then all of a sudden, one bit of new technology comes along, and they got rid of these because they were redundant. That British 105 gun outclassed this one in terms of penetration. No point having a tank this big with a 120mm gun on if you could do the same thing with that British gun, which is why these weren't in service long, because they were superseded quickly, or put it bluntly, they were dumped on the American Marines. Now, the technology of ammunition still continues to be developed. The next generation after tungsten rounds were just fin rounds. In other words, a metal dart in a cylinder fired out the end of the barrel of a tank. The cylinder falls away. The metal dart, no explosive on it, just made of dense metal like tungsten or depleted uranium. That going through the air will penetrate a tank, and the latest generation ones have actually got metal darts in 2 parts. So if the first part of the dart penetrates or is defeated, the second part will go all the way through. So the ammunition is also part of that story of how you knock out tanks, not just the size of these whopping great big guns we can see over there on those different tanks. And we can see what the British Army's got a little bit later on today by seeing some of those, well, we'll see the Army's kit when it comes in a bit later on. So that's some of the guns from the Cold War. And we're now, I'm just going to hand over to Steve, but in a moment we're going to look at how those tanks were combined together to actually make a battle group. So tanks never on their own, what did they fight with?
Thank you very much indeed, David. Welcome back. This is Tankfest 2026, powered and presented by the World of Tanks here at the Tank Museum, home of the tank.
What an awesome display, Nick, there, and certainly some big guns. 4005, of course, M60, and of course one of my favourites, Centurion.
Yeah, and the M47, don't forget, which is
Don't
a
forget the
vehicle
M47.
we had restored in time for Tankfest last year. So thank you to all of those that supported that and the FV4005 project. But speaking about restoration project, as you may know, as a result of the popularity of the King Tiger, which you guys brought to Tankfest last year, we've decided we were going to have a go at restoring one of our own. And in our next video, we're going to have a look at how that restoration project is going so far.
KT-V2. It's the oldest King Tiger in the world, the only survivor with this unique pre-production turret, and the focus of our most ambitious restoration yet. Since launching our fundraiser in September, we've raised over £400,000, and we've made big steps in the restoration too. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the story so far.
Yeah, so it's finally back in the workshop, and we're going to start with the tear down of this project. We don't know what we're going to find, so it will be a learning process all throughout this project. We are at the moment prepping for the gun to be removed. So we're going for our second option, which is to remove the entire breech and gun through the back hatch right now. And we're going to do the final measurements to see if it actually all fits as it is through that back hatch.
And we're just walking it back until we can get enough on out here to get the crane this side, and then we'll pull the whole thing through.
We're in the middle of prepping to get the turret off, going to take the weight and obviously weigh it, and then hopefully turret and the basket will come out in one.
The end's broken off. They've usually got that bit on that end, and they've got these little collars that go over it. It's broken off. What we're going to do next is we're going to remove the sprocket carrier. So we've undone all the bolts and knocked over the lock washers. Yeah, it's fairly loose, so in theory we shouldn't need the jacking bolt, so it should come off quite easily.
It's a bit trickier, that's all. Yes, that's definitely whoa.
So now we've got the sprocket carrier off. As you can see, our final drive, so we've got to remove it. So we can't remove the final drive until we've got the brakes off inside. Hopefully we can remove them as a unit. If not, we'll have to take them apart.
This looks intelligent there. Look, would you like a pointy finger?
Right now, we're doing the rim rot check, so getting ready to remove the suspension, but first, whilst it's all together, let's see what condition it's in. So we're at the stage where the vehicle is on some chocks, so it's raised off the ground, so we can start removing the suspension and road wheels. We're having a bit of issue figuring out how we actually remove the road wheels.
Thanks to our generous supporters, we've already achieved so much, but there's still plenty more to do. If you want to play a part in bringing KT-V2 back to life, then support the project at tankmuseum.org/KT-V2.